I am Paige. I am 34 years old. And exactly 2 months ago, I woke up, groggy and terrified in a sterile hospital bed to violently discover that my prematurely born infant daughter was being entirely cared for by complete strangers, all because my biological mother aggressively chose to spend the night gambling at a luxury casino rather than rushing to her dying child's bedside. For 9 grueling, exhausting years, I secretly, diligently wired my parents exactly $4,500 on the first of every single month. That equates to nearly $500,000 in stolen youth and sacrificed dreams. Not a single time in those 9 agonizing years did anyone in that house ever utter the words, "Thank you." Then came the horrific, rain-swept night I lay entirely broken in the emergency trauma ward, suffering from a violently collapsed lung, severe internal bleeding, and 3 crushed ribs. My tiny baby girl was lying completely alone in an incubator in the neonatal intensive care unit, and my mother casually told my frantic husband over the phone, "Paige inherently always manufactures these dramatic emergencies. Your sister Megan absolutely never causes these kinds of inconvenient problems." Exactly 3 hours after I finally pulled out my phone and permanently canceled every single automated bank transfer, my elderly grandfather unexpectedly walked through the heavy wooden doors of my hospital room. He was carrying a massive, heavily worn manila folder. And exactly what he quietly revealed to me next violently changed the entire trajectory of my universe. Before I take you through the meticulous, terrifying sequence of events that permanently shattered my toxic family, please take a moment to engage with this story. But I ask that you only do so if this journey of profound betrayal and ultimate survival genuinely resonates deep within your soul. I would also love to know exactly who is sitting in the dark listening to my voice right now. Please drop a comment letting me know what city you are tuning in from and what time the clock is currently showing in your part of the world. Now, I deeply need to pull you backward in time. Let me take you back exactly 9 years to the specific, quiet evening I made the very first massive financial transfer that silently started this entire nightmare. I was exactly 25 years old, freshly graduated from my university accounting program. My very first legitimate corporate paycheck had literally just cleared into my checking account, and I vividly remember staring at the glowing digital numbers on my laptop screen exactly as if it were a genuine miracle. I had aggressively clawed my way out of debt, and I finally felt safe. Then, my cell phone abruptly vibrated on my cheap desk. It was my mother, Linda. Her voice aggressively cracked over the line. She was audibly, violently weeping. "Paige," she choked out. "It is your father. He just suffered a mild stroke. They rushed him to the clinic." My entire heart completely stopped beating in my chest. "What? Is he physically going to survive?" "He is currently stabilized," she sobbed, her voice pitched high with sheer panic. "But honey, our health insurance is absolutely terrible. The impending medical bills are going to completely bury us, and we're already 3 months entirely delinquent on the primary mortgage. The bank is aggressively threatening foreclosure." I gripped the plastic phone so fiercely my knuckles turned stark white. "Exactly. How much capital do you urgently need to save the house?" "I absolutely hate burdening your young shoulders with this, Paige. You literally just started your adult career, but you're undeniably the absolute only person on earth who can save this family from ruin. $2,000 a month. That is exactly what the bank demands to restructure the debt." I aggressively set up the automated recurring bank transfer that exact same evening. "One final, critical thing," my mother whispered right before disconnecting the call. "Do absolutely not breathe a single word of this arrangement to your father. He is an incredibly proud man. He would be utterly humiliated and ashamed. This secret strictly stays between you and me." I immediately agreed. Of course, I blindly agreed. What kind of heartless, monstrous daughter would actively refuse to rescue her own family from the streets? She absolutely never said thank you. Not on that terrifying first night. Not ever. Instead, she smoothly conditioned me to believe that this was simply exactly what good, loyal daughters inherently do. Exactly 3 days later, I was casually scrolling through my social media feed when a photograph violently stopped my scrolling thumb. My younger sister, Megan, had just uploaded a brand new picture. She was standing in a high-end boutique, proudly holding up a massively expensive, imported Louis Vuitton handbag, grinning radiantly at the camera lens. The accompanying caption read, "I possess the absolute best mom in the entire universe." She intimately knew I desperately needed some retail therapy after my annoying breakup. I sat entirely paralyzed on my second-hand couch and stared intensely at that glossy photograph for a very long time. I almost picked up the phone to aggressively confront my mother about the horrific discrepancy. Almost. But then the heavy, toxic conditioning kicked in. I frantically lied to myself, claiming that perhaps the designer bag was heavily discounted on sale. Perhaps Megan truly was suffering severe emotional distress. Perhaps I was being an incredibly cruel, selfish monster for even daring to question how they allocated their resources. That was the very first massive, toxic lie I aggressively forced myself to swallow. It undeniably would not be the last. By the 3rd year of the arrangement, the endless justifications smoothly mutated, and the amount climbed to $3,500. Megan desperately desires to enroll in a highly exclusive, private online marketing course, my mother smoothly explained over the phone. She has finally, miraculously discovered her true life passion. She desperately wants to become a successful influencer. By the 5th year, the excuses became significantly bolder, and the amount hit $4,500. The sprawling house requires massive structural repairs. Your father's chronic health absolutely isn't improving. You intimately know exactly how exorbitant his out-of-pocket prescription medications are. I absolutely never questioned a single invoice. I simply, aggressively adjusted my own Spartan budget. I completely canceled my basic gym membership. I entirely stopped dining out with my colleagues. I actively took on grueling, late-night freelance consulting contracts just to desperately ensure the massive numbers successfully balanced. At the end of the month, Daniel and I had been exclusively dating for 2 years. By that point, he is an incredibly observant, brilliant software developer, and he instantly noticed the brutal financial strain I was constantly under. "Paige, when exactly are we going to sit down and seriously discuss purchasing a home together?" he asked gently one evening. Very soon, I deflected, looking away. I simply need to aggressively save up a little bit more capital first. He respectfully did not push the boundary. But following a highly toxic Thanksgiving dinner we endured at my parents' house, he quietly asked me a question that permanently embedded itself in my skull. "Have you ever actually noticed that your mother absolutely never, ever asks you a single question about your own life?" I offered a nervous, dismissive laugh. "She is simply incredibly busy hosting the family." She aggressively spent 40 entire minutes loudly bragging to the extended family about Megan's new Instagram followers, Daniel stated, his eyes locking directly onto mine. "She did not mention your massive corporate promotion a single time, Paige." I absolutely did not possess a logical defense for that reality. What I did possess was a highly specific, deeply buried memory. Approximately for years prior to that Thanksgiving, my elderly grandfather unexpectedly called my phone completely out of the blue. Grandpa Harold, my mother inherently always claimed he was simply too consumed by his prestigious charity foundation work to bother visiting us, that he fundamentally did not care about familial bonds. But on that specific day, his deep voice was incredibly soft, highly calculated, and heavily cautious. "Paige, I urgently need to ask you something vital. Are you genuinely happy in life? Is she actively treating you well?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Something dark and heavy in his vocal tone, made me feel incredibly uneasy. Yes, Grandpa. Absolutely. Everything is perfectly fine. He remained completely silent for a long, analyzing moment. Then, if that reality ever fundamentally changes, you must immediately call my private number. Promise me that you will. I promised him. Then I hung up the phone and aggressively forced myself to forget the interaction entirely. I absolutely should not have forgotten. Falling pregnant permanently changed the entire axis of the universe. I was 33 years old when I stared down at the plastic stick and saw those two unmistakable, solid pink lines. Daniel violently broke down and cried tears of pure joy. I cried right alongside him. For the absolute first time in years, I physically felt something massive and protective shift deep inside my chest. I immediately sat down at my laptop and aggressively started doing the terrifying mathematics I had been actively avoiding for nearly a decade. $4,500 a month, multiplied by 12 months, multiplied by 9 entire years. Exactly $486,000. I literally could have purchased a sprawling home in cash. I could have fully funded an entire elite university trust for my unborn child. I could have actually lived a beautiful, unburdened youth. But I violently pushed those dark regrets away. The absolute only thing that mattered now was aggressively protecting the innocent baby growing inside me. I immediately dialed my mother's number. Mom, I have absolutely wonderful news. Daniel and I are expecting a baby. Oh, Paige. Finally. She let out a dramatic, breathy sigh. I was genuinely beginning to deeply worry you were absolutely never going to provide me with beautiful grandchildren. I forcefully let that toxic, backhanded comment slide off my armor. I possessed something significantly harder to say. Mom, we urgently need to discuss the automated monthly bank transfers. With the new baby arriving, Daniel and I desperately need to hoard our capital. I was thinking I absolutely must reduce the transfer down to $3,000 a month for the foreseeable future. Total, suffocating silence violently gripped the line. I slowly counted 10 seconds in my head, then 20. After absolutely everything your father and I have violently sacrificed for your existence, Paige, her voice was pure, unadulterated ice. Do you possess any concept of exactly what premium medications your father relies upon to survive? Do you possess any idea what they actively cost us? I genuinely thought you possessed a generous heart, but clearly you exclusively think about your own selfish desires. That is exactly what you constantly do. I absolutely did not reduce the transfer amount that month. Just before she aggressively terminated the call, I clearly heard my father's gruff voice echoing faintly in the background. Linda, perhaps we really should just let the girl, Robert, stay entirely out of this conversation, my mother viciously snapped. The line went completely dead. It was such an incredibly brief, microscopic moment. I almost completely forgot it happened. But intensely looking backward, I strongly believe my father was already beginning to psychologically crack under the immense weight of their lies. That specific night, sleep completely evaded me. I found myself mindlessly scrolling through my mother's public Facebook profile. There she prominently was, in a photograph uploaded exactly 3 days prior, lounging luxuriously at a 5-star day spa with her affluent friends. Expensive cucumber slices resting over her eyes. The glossy caption read, "Absolutely essential self-care Sunday with my beautiful girls." The exact same week she viciously screamed at me that my father's vital prescriptions were aggressively bleeding them dry. I stared intensely at that digital photograph until my eyes physically burned in their sockets. Daniel found me violently sobbing on the bathroom floor at 2 o'clock in the morning. Paige, what on earth is wrong? Absolutely nothing, I lied, seamlessly wiping my face. Just intense pregnancy hormones. It was another massive lie. They were becoming terrifyingly easier to tell. When I was 7 months pregnant, incredibly exhausted, and insanely still blindly wiring them The capital. Daniel sat me down at the kitchen table. He had a massive, complex spreadsheet completely open on his glowing laptop. I urgently need you to look at this hard data, Paige. He had meticulously, professionally tracked absolutely everything. Every single monthly transfer, every single fabricated excuse she had utilized, every single time I had pathetically said, just one final month. And then submissively kept the pipeline flowing. Paige, this equates to nearly $500,000. Seeing the staggering number printed out in bold black ink made my chest physically constrict. That is literally 2 massive down payments on luxury houses. That is our daughter Emma's entire comprehensive college fund. That is decades of secure retirement savings completely set on fire. I desperately started to defend the abuse. But Daniel, they genuinely needed the... Did they actually need it, Paige? He aggressively turned the laptop screen toward my face. Your mother proudly posted about purchasing a custom, imported living room furniture set last month. Megan literally just returned from a lavish 2-week vacation in Cabo San Lucas. Your father's supposed medical prescriptions somehow miraculously cost significantly more than aggressive cancer treatments. I possessed absolutely zero answers. I am absolutely not dictating what you must do, Daniel stated incredibly quietly, his voice filled with deep sorrow. But I desperately need you to aggressively ask yourself something vital. If you actively continue funding this abuse, exactly what specific lesson does our innocent daughter learn from you? That her own mother is nothing but a disposable ATM machine? That the concept of family inherently means aggressively bleeding until you possess absolutely nothing left to give? I desperately wanted to fiercely argue with him. I wanted to aggressively scream that he simply didn't comprehend my family dynamics. But he completely, utterly understood. That was the exact, devastating problem. What exactly happens if I permanently stop? I whispered, terrified tears blurring my vision. What if they permanently hate my existence? Daniel gently reached across the table and firmly grasped my trembling hand. Then you will absolutely, finally know the unvarnished truth. You will finally discover exactly what your existence is truly worth to them. I was absolutely not emotionally prepared to uncover that horrific truth. Not quite yet, but the universe inherently possesses a highly violent method of aggressively forcing your hand. Exactly 2 months later, I was lying completely helpless in a sterile hospital trauma bed suffering from a violently punctured lung and severe internal bleeding. My premature baby was trapped inside the neonatal intensive care unit, and my mother's venomous voice was echoing clearly through my devastated husband's cellular phone. Paige inherently always manufactures these dramatic emergencies. Some brutal life lessons absolutely must be learned the hard way. October 17th. A Thursday night. Exactly 47 minutes past 9 o'clock. I vividly remember the exact timestamp because I had literally just glanced at my glowing phone screen. Daniel had sweetly texted, "Please drive. Incredibly safe. I love you endlessly." I was 36 weeks heavily pregnant, completely bone-tired from working a grueling, late-night corporate audit. The freezing autumn rain was aggressively coming down in massive, blinding sheets. The highly specific kind of torrential downpour that violently blurs oncoming headlights into aggressive smears of yellow light. I was exactly 3 miles away from the safety of my driveway, the massive intersection at Maple and 5th Street. I explicitly possessed the solid green light. I remember that specific detail with absolute, crystal clarity. Green inherently means go. Green inherently means you are safe. The massive commercial pickup truck violently ran the red light at terrifying speed. I absolutely did not even possess the microsecond required to see the heavy grille coming toward my door. 1 exact second, I was peacefully thinking about drawing a warm bath and finally getting some sleep. The exact next second, metal was violently screaming, glass was explosively shattering into a million pieces, and the entire universe was aggressively spinning upside down. I physically felt the catastrophic impact resonate deep inside my bones, violently crushing my chest, ripping directly into the specific, sacred place where my unborn daughter was supposed to remain. Perfectly safe. My vehicle airbags violently deployed with the force of a bomb. Multiple things inside my body violently cracked. I literally could not pull oxygen into my lungs. Every single frantic inhale felt exactly like inhaling shattered glass. Through the completely obliterated driver's side window, I faintly heard the distant wail of emergency sirens. Far away at first, then aggressively, deafeningly close. My trembling, bleeding hand frantically searched for my swollen belly. It was undeniably still there, still heavily round. But was she actively moving? I absolutely could not tell. Absolutely. Everything in my body hurt entirely too much to focus. Ma'am, can you hear my voice? Blinding tactical flashlights pierced the darkness. Frantic voices shouting. I felt someone aggressively cutting through the thick nylon of my jammed seatbelt. She is heavily pregnant. We absolutely need to extract her. Right now. I desperately tried to force my vocal cords to speak. I violently tried to scream, please, save my baby first. But absolutely zero sound emerged from my crushed throat. The absolute last image my brain processed before descending into the black void was the terrified face of a very young, panicked paramedic. The absolute last conscious thought I processed was a desperate prayer, please, take my life if you must, but please let her survive. Then, total, suffocating nothingness. I would absolutely not regain consciousness for 14 agonizing hours. And when I finally woke up, I would brutally learn exactly what my biological family was constructed of. Daniel was physically trapped inside an airport terminal in Seattle when his phone violently rang. He explicitly told me all the horrifying details later regarding exactly how the nightmare unfolded. He was sitting exhausted in his sparse hotel room, meticulously reviewing architectural codes for a massive morning presentation. The caller ID boldly displayed Denver General Hospital. Mr. Reynolds, this is Dr. Okonkwo. Your wife has just been involved in a catastrophic motor vehicle collision. Daniel absolutely does not remember frantically packing his suitcase. He absolutely does not remember blindly calling the airline. Just fragmented, terrifying memories of sprinting aggressively through the massive airport terminal, pathetically begging the gate agents for an earlier departure. Being coldly informed the absolute soonest available flight was over 6 grueling hours away. Is my wife physically alive? He continuously, aggressively demanded of the hospital staff over the phone. Is my unborn baby alive? Your wife is currently inside the emergency operating theater. We were forced to execute an aggressive, emergency cesarean section. We delivered the infant early. She is currently stabilized inside the NICU. And Paige, she suffered a punctured lung, severe internal hemorrhaging, and multiple crushed ribs. She is in critical but stabilized condition. Daniel stood, completely paralyzed in the absolute center of SeaTac Airport and physically felt the solid ground permanently disappear from beneath his feet. 6 hours. He absolutely could not reach my bedside for 6 agonizing hours. His beloved wife was lying completely unconscious on a bloody operating table. His tiny newborn daughter was trapped entirely alone inside an incubator. And he was over 2,000 miles away. He instinctively executed the absolute only logical action he could process in his panic state. He aggressively dialed my mother's phone number. She lived exactly 20 short minutes away from the hospital campus. 20 minutes. She could easily arrive before my grueling surgery even concluded. She could sit and protectively hold Emma. She could be sitting right there holding my hand when I finally woke up from the darkness. The phone rang exactly 4 times. Hello? Linda's voice was incredibly cheerful, completely relaxed. Linda, it is Daniel. Paige has been in a horrific car accident. She is currently in emergency surgery. The baby? Oh my God. A sharp gasp. Genuine. Unadulterated shock. Is she physically okay? I honestly do not know yet. I desperately need you to drive to the hospital immediately. Please. I absolutely cannot secure a flight out of here for 6 hours. A heavy, loaded pause hung over the cellular connection. 6 hours is entirely too long. And that is exactly when absolutely everything in the universe violently changed. Yes. Tonight, Daniel's voice violently cracked with raw emotion. Right now, please. Your newborn granddaughter is lying inside the NICU completely alone. Another heavy pause. And echoing in the background, Daniel clearly heard something incredibly distinct. The unmistakable, chaotic sound of bright, electronic bells chiming. The aggressive, chaotic soundtrack of dozens of active slot machines. Daniel, you explicitly know Megan is currently enjoying her lavish Caribbean cruise this week. What on earth does that have to do with? I absolutely promise to feed and watch her exotic cat. Whiskers gets incredibly severe. Anxiety when he is left alone in the apartment. Daniel actually laughed. He let out a harsh, hysterical laugh because surely this absolutely had to be a sick, twisted prank. Linda, your biological daughter is currently fighting for her life in the intensive care unit. Your tiny granddaughter was just violently born. Premature. I am desperately asking you to drive exactly 20 minutes. Paige inherently always manufactures these dramatic, chaotic emergencies. Her vocal tone violently turned freezing cold and deeply annoyed. Your sister Megan absolutely never causes these types of inconvenient problems. Megan is so incredibly organized, so perfectly put together. Perhaps if Paige wasn't constantly, selfishly working so incredibly late, she was aggressively driving home from her corporate job. Linda, a massive commercial truck violently ran a red light and crushed her vehicle. Well, I am absolutely certain it is not nearly as horrific as it currently sounds. You intimately know exactly how these hospitals dramatically exaggerate situations. Please call me tomorrow morning. When things finally calm down, the electronic slot machines chimed aggressively. Again, significantly louder this time. She wasn't even attempting to conceal her location. You are currently standing inside a casino, Daniel stated, his voice completely flat and dead. I am currently enjoying a rare, well-deserved night out with my close friends. Is that a federal crime? Your daughter almost died tonight. And she didn't, did she? She will be perfectly fine. She is inherently always perfectly fine. A heavy sigh, dripping with massive inconvenience. Besides, Daniel, you actively chose to marry her. This is entirely your personal responsibility now, absolutely not mine. She abruptly disconnected the call. Daniel stared blankly at his glowing phone screen for a very long time. Then he executed an action he had absolutely never done before. He slowly scrolled through his saved contacts to a highly specific number I had casually mentioned to him exactly once, years ago. Harold Green, my grandfather. He firmly pressed the call button. At 78 years old, my fierce grandfather answered the phone on the very second ring. I violently woke up to blinding fluorescent lights and a thick, plastic tube shoved aggressively down my throat. Absolutely everything inside my body screamed in agony. My crushed chest, my shattered arm, my pounding skull. Even my very thoughts physically felt bruised and bleeding. A kind-faced nurse gently leaned over my bed. Mrs. Reynolds, you are currently safe inside the ICU. You have just endured massive surgery. Please, desperately try not to move your body. I literally could not speak around the thick tube, but my trembling hand immediately flew down to my stomach. Flat, empty, pure, white-hot, suffocating. Panic violently seized my brain. The experienced nurse instantly understood my terror. Your beautiful daughter is miraculously alive. She is currently resting safely inside the NICU. She is incredibly small, but she is fiercely strong. I immediately started violently crying. I absolutely could not stop the hot tears from flowing. They gently removed the breathing tube approximately an hour later. My voice emerged from my throat sounding exactly like dragging sandpaper across concrete. Where exactly is my husband? He is currently airborne on a flight. He should safely land here in approximately 2 hours. My mother. The nurse visibly hesitated. That tiny, awkward hesitation instantly told me absolutely everything I needed to know. Absolutely no family members have arrived yet, ma'am. No one at all. My innocent daughter was violently brought into this world. I nearly died on an operating table, and absolutely no one from my biological family bothered to show up. I desperately asked for my cell phone. The paramedics had miraculously salvaged it from the crushed wreckage of my vehicle. The glass screen was heavily shattered into a spiderweb pattern, but it was still functional. 0 missed phone calls from my mother. 0 frantic text messages. Absolutely nothing. But there was exactly 1 new digital notification. An Instagram post uploaded by Megan. Timestamped exactly 3 hours ago. A flawless, heavily filtered selfie taken on the sunny deck of a luxury cruise ship. A premium, tropical cocktail gripped tightly in her hand. The caption read, "Actively living my absolute best life. Immaculate Caribbean. Vibes only." I slowly placed the cracked phone face down onto the blanket. I urgently need to hire a private, overnight night nurse, I managed to croak out to the attending physician. Someone highly qualified to sit constantly with my daughter in the NICU until my husband successfully arrives. The hospital seamlessly connected me with an elite, private agency. Exactly 40 minutes later, a woman quietly walked into my dim hospital room. "Mrs. Reynolds, my name is Maggie. I will be meticulously taking care of little Emma tonight." She was a woman in her mid-40s, possessing incredibly warm, empathetic eyes and highly competent, steady hands. "Wait a minute," she stated, closely reading my medical chart attached to the bed. "Reynolds. Paige Reynolds." "Yes," I whispered. He used to constantly tell me that his absolute biggest, most profound regret in life was absolutely not speaking up significantly sooner. I honestly never truly understood exactly what he meant by that. She paused, intently studying my battered face. "Would you like me to proactively contact him for you?" I still possessed his private phone number. I slowly, painfully shook my head. "Absolutely. Not yet. I desperately need time to process absolutely everything first." She offered a slow nod, deeply respecting my boundary. But just before she quietly exited the room to tend to Emma, she hastily scribbled a name and number onto a small notepad and placed it gently onto my rolling bedside table. "Just strictly in case you happen to change your mind tonight." I absolutely did not know then that someone else had already aggressively made that exact phone call. My heart violently stuttered in my chest. He actually talked about my existence? Maggie remained standing by the bed while I slowly processed her profound words. "What exactly did he say about me? That you were incredibly, fiercely brilliant? That you worked entirely too hard? That he worried obsessively about your survival?" She paused. He also explicitly stated that his absolute biggest failure was not speaking up significantly sooner. I honestly never comprehended what he meant. I absolutely didn't either. Not in that moment. After Maggie quietly left the room to vigilantly check on my newborn daughter, I lay completely alone in the suffocating darkness. My entire right arm was encased in a heavy plaster cast. Every single shallow breath sent white-hot spikes of pure agony shooting violently through my crushed ribs, but my mind was incredibly, terrifyingly sharp. Significantly sharper and more focused than it had been in almost a decade. I clumsily fumbled for my cracked phone utilizing my uninjured left hand. I opened my secure banking application. The massive, chronological transaction history slowly loaded onto the screen. 9 entire years of relentless transfers. Automatic. Reliable. functioning exactly like a flawless mechanical clock. $4,500 disappearing every single month. I aggressively scrolled backward and backward and backward through the digital ledger. Not a single solitary "thank you" text message existed in my entire archive. Not a single ounce of basic human acknowledgement. Just massive amounts of my hard-earned money endlessly flowing outward into a toxic void that was absolutely never, ever satisfied. My trembling finger hovered directly over the application settings. Manage automated transfers. My mother's toxic conditioning voice violently echoed inside my skull. This is exactly what loyal, good daughters do. But exactly what do loving mothers do? What exactly do real mothers do when their biological daughters are violently bleeding to death inside emergency trauma rooms? They aggressively show up. That is exactly what they do, unless they simply do not care. I firmly tapped the glowing screen. Cancel transfer. The application prompted, "Are you absolutely sure?" Yes. I tapped the screen a second time. Cancel transfer. Are you sure? Yes. 9 grueling years. $486,000. 3 simple digital taps. That is absolutely all the physical effort it took to permanently end the abuse. I slowly placed the cracked phone back down. For the absolute first time in nearly a decade, I physically felt something massive and heavy loosen deep inside my chest. Something that possessed absolutely nothing to do with my crushed ribs. I absolutely should have executed this action years ago. Exactly 3 hours later, the heavy wooden door to my hospital room slowly opened, and there stood my grandfather, Harold Green. He looked exactly, impeccably as I remembered him, standing incredibly tall, even at 78 years old, his thick silver hair cropped impeccably short, possessing piercing, intelligent eyes that absolutely missed nothing. The highly observant eyes of a man who had spent 40 entire years critically reading human behavior from a judge's bench. Paige, his deep voice violently broke upon uttering my name. My beautiful girl. I came here as incredibly fast as I possibly could. I instantly burst into violent, uncontrollable tears. He confidently crossed the sterile room in 3 massive strides and firmly took my hand, my uninjured left hand. His physical grip was incredibly warm, strong, and deeply steadying. "I am right here now," he whispered fiercely. "I am right here." I literally could not force my vocal cords to speak. For entire years. It had been 4 agonizing years since I had last laid eyes on him. My mother always, constantly possessed a highly convenient, fabricated excuse. Grandpa is constantly traveling. Grandpa is entirely too consumed by his massive foundation work. Grandpa absolutely does not really participate in mundane family visits anymore. I genuinely thought. I violently choked on the painful words. Mom explicitly told me you absolutely did not want to see me anymore. His strong jaw tightened into a rigid line of pure fury. She maliciously told me the exact same toxic lie about you. We stared directly at each other, the decades of aggressive, systemic psychological manipulation suddenly, horrifyingly visible in the air between us. "Daniel frantically called my phone tonight," Grandpa stated quietly. He explicitly told me exactly what happened to you. Exactly what your mother coldly said to him. Intense, burning shame violently flooded through my entire body. "Grandpa, no." He gently but firmly squeezed my hand. "Do absolutely not apologize to me. You possess absolutely nothing to apologize for in this situation." He slowly reached deep inside his heavy wool coat and pulled out a thick manila folder. It looked incredibly worn and battered at the edges. "Paige, I desperately need to confess something to you. I have explicitly known for quite a while now about the massive flow of money." My stomach violently plummeted toward the floorboards. "What?" "The massive transfers you execute every month. For 9 entire years." He slowly opened the thick folder. Tucked safely inside were highly detailed, Highlighted bank statements. My personal, private bank. Statements. I have been intensely, quietly watching. How exactly? I possess my highly specific legal methods. He offered the faint ghost of a sad smile. Deeply ingrained, old habits from sitting on the federal bench. I intrinsically knew something was fundamentally, toxically wrong with their lifestyle, so I aggressively looked into it. I stared blankly at the printed papers. Every single massive transaction meticulously documented. Why on earth didn't you say a single word to me? He remained completely, utterly silent for a very long, heavy moment. When he finally spoke, his deep voice carried decades of profound, unresolved regret, because I tragically made the exact same cowardly mistake with your beloved grandmother. I clearly saw massive, toxic problems festering within our family dynamic, and I passively remained silent, foolishly hoping they would magically fix themselves. She tragically passed away before I could permanently make things right. He intensely met my eyes. I foolishly, stupidly, thought that if I generously gave Linda enough rope, she might eventually choose to do better on her own accord, that a mother's inherent, biological love would eventually, miraculously win out over her greed. His jaw tightened dangerously. Instead, she maliciously used that exact same rope to violently tie you down for 9 entire years. She completely, utterly failed. And I absolutely will not make the same cowardly mistake twice. Grandpa slowly pulled a plastic chair incredibly close to my hospital bed. The thick folder lay wide open between us, exactly like hard evidence presented in a federal courtroom. $486,000, he stated, incredibly quietly. That is exactly the staggering amount of capital you have. Surrender to them. I offered a slow, defeated nod. Physically speaking, felt entirely impossible. Do you happen to know exactly what toxic lies your mother tells people at extended family gatherings? I slowly shook my head. She claims that you are entirely too busy and self-important for family, that you are incredibly selfish, that you absolutely never offer to help out. His voice hardened into steel. She stood directly in my living room last Christmas Eve and explicitly told me you violently refused to financially contribute a single dime to your father's mounting medical bills. My mouth physically dropped wide open. In pure shock. That is absolutely not. I have been aggressively paying for absolutely everything. I know. He abruptly held up a commanding hand. I know. That, Paige. That is exactly why I initially started digging into the records. He pulled out another crisp sheet of paper. It was a printed email chain. Exactly 3 years ago, your mother aggressively came to my private office. She desperately wanted me to permanently alter my final will. She demanded I leave absolutely everything exclusively to Megan. What? Her manipulative argument was that you already possessed a highly successful, wealthy husband and you absolutely did not require any financial assistance. His laugh was incredibly dark and bitter. Meanwhile, you were violently exhausting yourself working 60-hour weeks and anonymously sending her enough capital to purchase a house in cash. I felt physically, violently sick to my stomach. I absolutely did not alter the will. Not back then. I desperately wanted to see exactly what horrific lengths she would go to. He leaned intensely forward. But tonight, Paige, tonight she finally showed me exactly what kind of monster she truly is. Grandpa, I honestly do not understand. How exactly did you find out about the events of tonight so incredibly fast? He smiled. A genuine, terrifyingly sharp smile this time. Someone highly observant called me. Someone who has been quietly, vigilantly watching her behavior, too. The heavy hospital room door abruptly opened. I instinctively turned my head, fully expecting to see a triage nurse. It was my father. Robert Martinez stood awkwardly in the doorway, his eyes incredibly red-rimmed and swollen, looking significantly older and more broken than I had ever seen him in my life. I am the one who called him, Dad stated, his voice completely hollow. I absolutely could not remain silent anymore. Before I could even formulate a response to, "Dad," the heavy door violently swung open a second time. My mother proudly stood there, draped in a flawless, expensive silk blouse and wearing full, impeccable evening makeup. I could literally smell her cloying, expensive perfume from entirely across the sterile room, the highly specific, premium scent she exclusively saved for elite, special occasions. I violently learned significantly later exactly what had ultimately brought her to the hospital. At approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, Grandpa had aggressively called her cellular phone directly. His vocal tone was pure, unadulterated ice. "Your eldest daughter almost violently died tonight. Your newborn granddaughter is currently fighting for her life in the NICU. And I intimately know exactly where you were tonight, Linda. I explicitly know absolutely everything." That was the exact microsecond my mother brutally realized this situation was absolutely no longer just about my survival. This was entirely about her massive, impending inheritance. It was about her wealthy father knowing the absolute truth. It was strictly about aggressive damage control. She absolutely had not rushed here to comfort me. She had rushed here exclusively to manage a catastrophic public relations crisis. She completely froze in her tracks the exact moment she saw Grandpa already sitting there. "Dad, what on earth are you doing here?" Then she finally spotted my father standing in the corner. Her facial expression violently flickered, deep confusion, and then something infinitely sharper and colder. Pure, ruthless calculation. She flawlessly switched emotional modes. Instantly, her face perfectly crumpled into an Oscar-worthy display of maternal concern. She frantically rushed to my bedside. "Paige, my precious baby girl. I came here the absolute second I heard the tragic news." I slowly glanced over at the digital wall clock. It read exactly 3:47 a.m. The horrific accident had occurred at 9:47 p.m. 6 entire hours had passed. Linda, Grandpa's booming voice, violently cut completely through her theatrical performance. "You arrived at this hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning. The catastrophic accident occurred over 6 hours ago. Where exactly were you hiding?" My mother's trembling hand, which had been desperately reaching for mine, abruptly stopped suspended in midair. The highway traffic was completely gridlocked. I couldn't escape from You were actively gambling at the Desert Rose Luxury Casino, Dad stated, incredibly quietly from the corner. "I aggressively tracked your phone's GPS location." My mother's flawless face went stark white, then flushed a violent, angry red. Then she smiled. That highly specific, tight, incredibly dangerous smile I knew entirely too well. "Robert, how absolutely dare you invade my privacy? I was enjoying a rare evening with my close friends. Am I absolutely not permitted to possess a social life? While your biological daughter was being sliced open in emergency surgery, Grandpa's words were freezing ice. While your newborn granddaughter was trapped inside an incubator. While your frantic son-in-law was pathetically begging you for a shred of help." My mother aggressively turned back to me. Her eyes were desperately pleading now. "Paige, honey, surely you understand." I genuinely did not comprehend exactly how serious the situation was. Daniel constantly, aggressively exaggerates everything. He inherently always. "Mom." My voice emerged from my crushed chest significantly, steadier than I ever expected it to. "Stop talking immediately." She blinked, rapidly in shock. "I explicitly heard exactly what you coldly told Daniel. Paige inherently always manufactures these dramatic emergencies. This is your personal responsibility now." I explicitly know exactly the horrific words you said. I stared directly at her. I really, truly looked at the monster standing before me. "Do absolutely not look at me for salvation, Mom. I absolutely cannot save you from the consequences this time. Okay, I desperately need to pause the narrative right here for a second. If you are sitting there watching this video and you have ever possessed a highly toxic family member who inherently always possessed a fabricated excuse, who was absolutely never present when you desperately needed them, but aggressively expected you to drop your entire existence for their minor inconveniences. I truly, deeply see you. I really do. Please let me know your stories down in the comments. Have you ever experienced that profound, life-altering moment where you finally, permanently stopped making pathetic excuses for someone you biologically loved? And if you are entirely new to this channel and you are deeply enjoying this journey of survival, please aggressively hit that subscribe button right now. Now, let us plunge directly back into that explosive hospital room. The suffocating silence inside that sterile hospital room was absolutely deafening. My mother stood completely frozen, trapped directly between my bed and my glaring grandfather. Her panicked eyes violently darted from face to hostile face, desperately searching for a single, gullible ally in the room. Finding absolutely none, Grandpa slowly reached for the thick manila folder. "Linda, I urgently want you to look closely at something." He aggressively pulled out the massive stack of highlighted bank statements and held them up high. "This document represents every single, massive financial transfer Paige has executed directly into your checking account over the past 9 consecutive years. Every single one." My mother's face completely drained of all remaining color. $486,000. Grandpa's vocal tone was incredibly steady, exactly like a federal judge delivering a final, unalterable death sentence. "Your eldest daughter diligently sent you nearly $500,000. She aggressively delayed purchasing her own home. She exhausted herself, working grueling weekends until her body broke down. She completely surrendered her own financial security exclusively for you. That is absolutely not the full story," my mother frantically stammered. "Do not." Grandpa's voice sharpened into a lethal blade. "Do absolutely not dare attempt to lie to my face." He aggressively pulled out another printed document. "You explicitly sat in my house and told me Paige was incredibly selfish. You maliciously told me she absolutely never offered to help the family financially. You aggressively told the entire extended family tree that she was entirely too busy and self-important for everyone." He slammed the paper down onto the table. "You maliciously, systematically lied to my face for years." My father stood silently in the far corner, intensely watching the execution. He looked incredibly old, thoroughly defeated, and utterly broken. "And you, Robert?" Grandpa violently turned his wrath toward him. "You explicitly knew about this massive theft, didn't you?" My father's voice was barely a raspy whisper. "Yes, I knew. And you cowardly chose to say absolutely nothing." I was utterly terrified of her wrath. My father finally lifted his head and met my eyes. "I am so profoundly sorry, Paige. I was a pathetic, useless coward." My mother finally located her lost voice. "This entire situation is completely ridiculous. That massive influx of money was. She generously offered it to us. We desperately needed it." "You desperately needed it?" Grandpa took an aggressive step closer to her, invading her space. "You desperately needed an expensive spa day? You urgently needed lavish casino nights? You desperately needed to purchase Megan an imported Louis Vuitton handbag while your other biological daughter actively skipped eating meals just to make her rent payments?" My mother's mouth opened wide, abruptly closed, and then opened again. For the absolute first time in my entire 34 years of existence, she possessed absolutely zero lies left to spin. My mother's absolute shock rapidly mutated into pure, unadulterated fury. She violently spun around to face my father. "You!" She aggressively jabbed a shaking finger directly at his chest. "You maliciously called him. You explicitly told him about the secret money transfers." My father physically flinched backward. But he absolutely did not back down this time. "Someone finally had to tell the truth, Linda. How absolutely dare you viciously betray me like this after absolutely everything I have sacrificed for this family? What exactly have you sacrificed, Linda? My father's voice violently cracked with emotion. What exactly have you done? I flawlessly held this family together. I meticulously managed absolutely everything. You maliciously managed to aggressively spend our innocent daughter's hard-earned money while systematically telling absolutely everyone in town she was a selfish monster. My father's hands were visibly shaking now. I silently watched it happen for years. I cowardly stayed quiet. I continuously told myself it wasn't actually that severe. But tonight, he slowly turned to look at me. His eyes were completely wet with tears. Tonight, Linda was actively sitting at the high-stakes blackjack table when Daniel desperately called her phone. I clearly overheard the entire horrific conversation. She actually genuinely laughed about it afterward. She callously stated, "Paige will easily figure it out on her own. She inherently always does." The entire sterile room seemed to violently tilt on its axis. Even intimately knowing exactly what I already knew, explicitly hearing the sadistic cruelty spoken aloud in front of witnesses was fundamentally different. It was infinitely heavier. I simply couldn't endure the evil anymore. My father's voice broke completely. I absolutely couldn't allow it to continue. So I aggressively called your grandfather. I explicitly told him absolutely everything I knew. My mother blankly stared at her husband exactly as if she had absolutely never laid eyes on him before in her life. You are actively choosing her side over mine? I am finally choosing exactly what is morally right. My father aggressively wiped his streaming eyes. For the absolute first time in 30 long years, I am finally choosing to do what is right. Grandpa firmly placed a supportive hand on my father's trembling shoulder, offering a silent, profound acknowledgement. Then he slowly turned his intense focus back to my mother. Linda, I am officially meeting with my estate attorney first thing tomorrow morning. I am entirely, permanently restructuring my final will. All the remaining color completely vanished from my mother's face. Dad, you absolutely cannot do that to us. Megan desperately needs. Megan is currently 29 years old and has absolutely never successfully held a legitimate job in her life. That is absolutely not Megan's inherent fault. That is entirely your massive failure as a mother. But we are completely, permanently done here, Linda. Grandpa's voice carried absolute, crushing finality. We are entirely done. My mother's carefully curated composure completely shattered into a million pieces. Dad, please, I am begging you. You simply do not understand the entire context. Paige absolutely does not require the massive inheritance money. She possesses Daniel. She possesses a highly lucrative career. Megan inherently possesses absolutely nothing. Megan possesses absolutely nothing entirely. Because you absolutely never permitted her to earn anything for herself. Grandpa stated coldly. You aggressively handed her unlimited funds instead of basic responsibility, lavish comfort instead of building her character. That is absolutely not maternal love, Linda. That is systemic, malicious sabotage. My mother desperately turned toward my hospital bed, her eyes wild and frantically pleading now. Paige, please, urgently talk to him. Tell him we can peacefully work this minor disagreement out as a loving family. We are your true family. I looked directly at her. I really, truly looked into her soul. This was the exact same woman who had patiently taught me how to ride a bicycle in the driveway. The woman who had softly braided my hair every morning before school. The woman who explicitly told me I could achieve absolutely anything I desired in life. This was also the exact same monster who had maliciously spent 9 entire years stealing my life savings while aggressively telling the entire town I was a selfish failure. The woman who coldly chose to play slot machines over rushing to her dying daughter's bedside. The woman who aggressively made me feel deep, suffocating guilt simply for existing. Both conflicting realities were undeniably true, and that specific dichotomy was the absolute hardest, most agonizing part to accept. Mom, my voice was incredibly calm. I was genuinely shocked by exactly how peaceful I felt. I absolutely cannot help you escape the consequences this time, but I have aggressively, blindly helped you for 9 long years. I am entirely, permanently done. She immediately started violently crying. Were they genuine, remorseful tears, or simply another manipulative performance? I honestly couldn't tell the difference anymore. And perhaps there genuinely was no difference left in her soul. Grandpa gently touched my uninjured hand. Paige, I honestly do not know if you desire absolutely anything from me after today. After all this wasted time, after exactly how profoundly I failed you by cowardly not speaking up significantly sooner, his strong voice visibly wavered with emotion. But I desperately want you to explicitly know that I truly see you now. I have inherently always deeply seen your worth. I fiercely squeezed his wrinkled hand. I absolutely do not require your money, Grandpa. I explicitly know you don't. I simply desperately needed someone in this family to finally show up for me. He smiled beautifully. The very first genuine, warm smile I had witnessed from him in years. You will absolutely possess both moving forward. I will aggressively make certain of it. My mother stood frozen, silently watching us bond. Something dark and fundamentally shifted in her facial expression. The pathetic tears instantly stopped flowing. And in that highly specific microsecond, I clearly saw it. She was absolutely not experiencing profound sadness. She was already aggressively, maliciously calculating her next manipulative move. For long, grueling weeks slowly passed. My crushed ribs agonizingly, slowly healed. My collapsed lung fully reinflated. Emma miraculously grew stronger with every passing day, aggressively hitting vital developmental milestones that the pessimistic doctors had warned might take many agonizing months to achieve. My life successfully found an entirely new, beautiful rhythm. Quiet, peaceful. Mornings drinking hot coffee. Emma's tiny, adorable sounds completely filling the warm house. Daniel actively working remotely from the living room just so he could remain protectively close to us. And absolutely zero massive amounts of money mysteriously vanishing from my bank account. The very first month without executing the massive transfer felt incredibly strange, exactly like missing a phantom limb. I obsessively kept checking my secure banking application deeply, irrationally expecting to see the massive withdrawal, but there was absolutely nothing there. Just pure, unadulterated peace. My mother aggressively called my phone constantly. Paige, please, we urgently need to talk. Paige, I have been doing a massive amount of deep soul-searching lately. Paige, you absolutely cannot just aggressively shut me out of your life forever. I completely, utterly ignored every single call. I was simply not emotionally prepared to engage. Then, one sunny afternoon, she left a voicemail that sounded entirely different. Paige. Her vocal tone was incredibly thick and undeniably wet with tears. I explicitly know I severely messed up. I know I deeply, violently hurt you. But please, I am begging you, just allow me to meet little Emma. Please just let me be her loving grandmother. I will absolutely do significantly better. I swear it. To you. I played that specific, agonizing message 3 consecutive times. Daniel silently watched me from across the room with a highly careful expression. You are actively considering granting her request, aren't you? Am I completely, utterly stupid if I do? You are absolutely not stupid, Paige. You are just incredibly hopeful. He gently walked over and kissed my forehead. That is a fundamentally different thing entirely. I finally gathered my courage and called her back. You get exactly 1 single chance, Mom. I am hosting a small, intimate 1-month celebration for Emma this coming weekend. You are permitted to attend, but this is absolutely your final shot. If you maliciously mess this Up in any capacity, I will permanently vanish. I swear it. Thank you so incredibly much, Paige. Thank you. The celebration was meticulously planned. Exactly 20 trusted individuals. Grandpa, Dad, a few incredibly close, loyal friends, supportive colleagues from my corporate firm, and my mother. Daniel actively assisted me with all the preparations. Simple decorations, amazing catered food, and a soft, welcoming playlist. Are you absolutely certain you want to endure the stress? He gently asked me the night prior. I slowly looked down at Emma, peacefully sleeping in her cozy bassinet. No, I am absolutely not certain. But I desperately need to know the unvarnished truth once and for all. He offered a slow nod. He completely understood the assignment. We both intrinsically knew this party was absolutely not about granting genuine second chances. It was entirely about securing absolute, final closure. The celebration officially commenced at 2:00. Grandpa happily arrived first, proudly carrying a massive stuffed elephant that was literally larger than Emma. Dad quietly arrived entirely alone. He and my mother had explicitly driven in entirely separate vehicles, a glaring detail which I immediately noticed, but respectfully chose not to mention. Close friends seamlessly filtered into the house, followed by my supportive work colleagues. The entire house beautifully filled with warm, loving bodies and incredibly genuine, heartfelt wishes. Emma peacefully slept, completely through the vast majority of the noise, blissfully, utterly unaware of her own grand celebration. My mother finally arrived at exactly 2:45 p.m. A full 45 minutes fashionably late. She confidently walked through the front door accompanied directly by Megan. I had absolutely, explicitly not invited Megan to attend. Surprise! My mother beamed an artificial, blinding smile. Megan graciously decided to fly back early from her luxury vacation just to officially meet her brand new niece. Megan offered a highly practiced, glossy Instagram smile. Hey sis, massive congrats on the new baby. I forced a tight, polite smile in return. Thank you so much for deciding to come. Daniel's strong hand instantly found mine under the table. It was simultaneously a warning and a physical anchor of support. My mother aggressively made the rounds, dramatically hugging people she barely knew, loudly exclaiming over the simple decorations, flawlessly playing the role of the utterly doting, perfect grandmother. 2. Absolutely anyone casually watching, she appeared entirely flawless. But I intently watched her cold eyes. She continuously, aggressively glanced over at Grandpa every few minutes, constantly checking his physical location in the room, meticulously tracking his movements like a predator. I was absolutely not the only person who noticed the behavior. Your mother is actively plotting something sinister, Daniel murmured directly into my ear. I explicitly know she is. Exactly 30 minutes into the busy party, I quietly slipped into the kitchen to grab more napkins. Megan was standing in the corner, aggressively typing on her smartphone. She absolutely did not notice me enter. Mom, you urgently need to initiate the conversation with him very soon. She was frantically whispering. But the tiled kitchen possessed incredibly good acoustics. I absolutely cannot continue to live like a peasant. I desperately need that inheritance money back. I completely froze in my tracks. I explicitly know that, honey. My mother's hushed voice crackled through the phone's speakerphone function. I am aggressively working on it right now. Just give me the perfect, vulnerable opening to strike. You explicitly promised me you would handle the situation. And I absolutely will handle it, Megan. Just blindly trust my process. I slowly stepped backward into the hallway, entirely silent. So, this was the absolute, horrific truth of it all. The supposed second chance, the tearful, pathetic apology, the desperate pleas to meet her grandchild. Absolutely all of it was a meticulously choreographed, theatrical play. Absolutely all of it was exclusively maliciously about securing the massive inheritance money. I absolutely should have known better. Deep down, I actually did know better. I simply, foolishly didn't want to believe it was true. I confidently walked back into the crowded living room. I was incredibly calm, laser-focused. Daniel took one single look at my facial expression and instantly understood that the bomb was about to detonate. What exactly happened in there? Just silently watch her. My mother had successfully, aggressively cornered Grandpa near the massive bay window. They were engaged in a highly intense, hushed conversation. She had her hand resting gently, pleadingly on his forearm, the exact, manipulative gesture she had perfected over decades of practice. But earlier that afternoon, someone had excitedly set up a karaoke machine for the kids. The wireless active microphone was currently resting innocuously on the side table directly next to them, and the massive speaker system was completely powered on. My mother was entirely, arrogantly oblivious to the danger. Dad, I explicitly know. Things have been incredibly tense between us lately. Her voice loudly, aggressively carried through the entire living room, heavily amplified and crystal clear over the speakers. But you absolutely must logically understand. Megan desperately requires that massive inheritance money significantly more than Paige does. Paige already possesses a wealthy husband and a highly lucrative corporate career. Megan possesses absolutely nothing of value in her life. The entire living room went completely, utterly silent. 20 pairs of shocked eyes simultaneously turned to stare directly at the bay window. My mother aggressively kept talking, completely oblivious to her captive audience. I am absolutely not asking you to aggressively cut Paige out of the will entirely. Just please, reconsider the financial split. It is only fair to Megan. Someone near the couch loudly coughed. The sharp sound violently cut through the dead air. My mother abruptly turned around, saw the dozens of staring faces, saw the active microphone resting on the table with its red light aggressively blinking. All the remaining color violently drained from her face. She frantically looked around the room in pure panic. That is absolutely not. You are entirely taking my words out of proper context. What conceivable context would possibly make that statement acceptable, Linda? My senior colleague, Sarah, aggressively stepped forward from the crowd. Did I literally just hear that correctly? You are actively lobbying to steal inheritance money at your own newborn granddaughter's welcome party? You absolutely do not understand the complex dynamics of our family. I understand perfectly plenty. Sarah's voice was forged from absolute steel. Paige is undeniably one of the absolute most generous, selfless human beings I know. And you are standing here aggressively, playing toxic financial politics with an innocent baby sleeping in the next room. My mother's mouth repeatedly opened and closed in shock. Absolutely zero sound emerged. Grandpa slowly, deliberately stepped away from her side. His facial expression was carved out of freezing stone. Absolutely everyone standing in this room just clearly heard exactly what I have intimately known for years. His powerful voice carried across the room, clear and utterly final. My biological daughter maliciously views her own children strictly as financial resources to exploit, absolutely not as human beings to love. The entire room collectively held its breath. I slowly stood up to my full height. My legs were perfectly steady. My vocal tone was incredibly clear and commanding. Mom. She violently whipped her head around to face me. Fresh tears were already frantically forming in her eyes. Genuine tears, or simply another manipulative performance? I would absolutely never, ever know the truth. Paige, please, I am begging you. This is all a massive, terrible misunderstanding. I was simply trying to stop. Exactly one single word. Incredibly gentle, but radiating absolute, unyielding firmness. She instantly stopped talking. I slowly walked to the absolute center of the living room. Absolutely everyone was intensely watching me. My loyal friends, my supportive colleagues, my remaining family members. I could physically feel the heavy weight of their undivided attention, exactly like a physical blanket. I generously granted you exactly one final chance today. My voice absolutely did not waver or crack. Not because I foolishly believed you had miraculously changed your toxic nature, but simply because my soul desperately needed to know the absolute truth for certain. My mother frantically reached her hands out toward me. Paige, for 9 entire years, I systematically, faithfully wired you $4,500 every single month. Do you possess the mental capacity to calculate exactly what that staggering number adds up to? $486,000. Nearly $500,000 in liquid cash. Loud, horrified gasps violently rippled through the crowded room. Someone in the back loudly whispered, "Oh my absolute God," while I was aggressively bleeding myself dry. Sending you that massive fortune, you maliciously told absolutely everyone in this town that I was a selfish monster. You claimed I absolutely never helped this family. You claimed I was entirely too arrogant and busy for you. I intentionally paused, allowing the devastating reality to sink deeply into the minds of the audience. On the terrifying night I very nearly died on an operating table, you were actively gambling at a luxury casino. Your premature granddaughter was lying completely alone inside a plastic incubator. You explicitly chose to play slot machines over our survival. My mother was violently crying now. Genuine, ugly tears of pure, unadulterated public humiliation finally falling. And today, I continued relentlessly at my innocent daughter's celebration party. You are absolutely still exclusively obsessing over stealing money, manipulating inheritances, and calculating exactly what assets you can maliciously extract from us. I took one deliberate step closer to her crumpled form. I am absolutely not doing this out of a dark place of anger, Mom. I am actively doing this out of profound love. My voice softened significantly. For my beautiful daughter, for my own soul, and honestly, even for you. Because someone absolutely should have aggressively stopped your destructive behavior a very long time ago. I took a deep, cleansing breath. From this exact day forward, we are entirely, permanently done. Do absolutely not call my phone. Do absolutely not attempt to visit my home. We are permanently finished. The thick, black mascara streaked violently down her face, mixing with her tears. She looked incredibly old, thoroughly broken, and entirely pathetic. And for the absolute first time in my entire existence, I did not feel a single microscopic ounce of guilt. The suffocating silence that followed my declaration was absolute and total. Then, my mother violently exploded in rage. "You ungrateful, malicious child." Her voice cracked with pure venom. "After absolutely everything I aggressively sacrificed for your life, I graciously raised you. I meticulously fed you. I gave you absolutely everything. You maliciously took absolutely everything from me, Mom." There is a massive, fundamental difference between the two concepts. Megan suddenly stepped forward from the hallway, attempting to play defense. Everyone in this room is aggressively overreacting. You do not possess the entire context of the story. Mom was simply desperately trying to save. Save. Exactly what, Megan? Sarah fiercely folded her arms across her chest. We all literally just listened to her aggressively beg her dying father to maliciously cut Paige out of his final will at a baby's celebration party. Exactly what? Missing part of that horrific story am I failing to comprehend? Megan's mouth snapped shut audibly. A man standing near the front door, James, one of Daniel's close corporate colleagues, loudly spoke up. Wait a minute. So she generously wired them $500,000 in cash, and they maliciously branded her as a selfish monster? Am I correctly understanding the math here? That is exactly what I just heard, someone else quietly murmured in agreement. The horrified whispers rapidly spread through the crowd. People were openly staring at my Mother with entirely new, deeply disgusted eyes. The heavy, suffocating weight of absolute societal judgment was finally settling over the room, exactly like a final, unalterable legal verdict. My father slowly stepped forward from the shadows. His hands were visibly, violently shaking, but his vocal tone was incredibly firm and resolved. Linda, we urgently need to leave this premises. Immediately. Robert, we absolutely cannot just. Yes, we absolutely can. He firmly placed a heavy hand onto her arm. We have inflicted entirely enough catastrophic damage here today. For a brief, terrifying moment, I genuinely thought my mother would aggressively fight him. I expected her to violently scream, to cause a massive, destructive scene. Instead, something fundamental inside her spine completely collapsed. The elaborate, theatrical performance was permanently over. Absolutely no one in the room was buying her tickets anymore. She slowly turned around without uttering another single word and walked defeatedly toward the front door. Megan immediately followed closely behind her, shooting me a look of pure, unadulterated venom. Just before she completely exited the house, my mother paused in the doorway. You will deeply, bitterly regret this decision, Paige. Someday, you will desperately need my help. I met her furious eyes with absolute, freezing calm. No, Mom. I foolishly spent 9 entire years falsely believing I needed your help. As it brutally turns out, I was completely, utterly wrong. The heavy wooden door clicked shut firmly behind them. The entire crowded room collectively exhaled a massive sigh of relief. And I finally felt an emotion I absolutely had not experienced in decades. Pure, unadulterated freedom. Okay, I desperately need to ask you a highly critical question. If you were standing exactly in my shoes, would you have generously granted your abusive mother that final, explosive second chance, or would you have aggressively, permanently severed all ties right there in the sterile hospital room? There is absolutely no right or wrong answer here. I am genuinely, deeply curious about human nature. Drop your unfiltered thoughts down in the comments section. And if you have absolutely not already done so, please aggressively hit that like button. It genuinely helps this powerful story reach significantly more survivors who desperately need to hear it. Now, let me finally tell you exactly what catastrophic fallout occurred after they fled the house. Exactly 2 weeks following the disastrous party, Grandpa called my phone with explosive news. It is officially finalized. He had formally met with his elite estate attorneys. The brand new ironclad will was officially signed, heavily witnessed, and securely filed with the courts. The financial breakdown was incredibly simple and devastating. Exactly 70% of the massive estate was bequeathed entirely to me, securely held in an ironclad trust exclusively for Emma's future. Exactly 20% was allocated to my father simply because he had finally, miraculously located his lost spine and spoken the truth. The remaining 10% was conditionally allocated to my mother and Megan, with one massive, humiliating caveat attached. My mother was legally, strictly mandated to successfully complete 6 continuous months of intensive psychotherapy with a court-approved, licensed counselor before she was permitted to receive a single, microscopic cent of the funds. I honestly do not expect her arrogance to ever allow her to comply with the terms, Grandpa stated with a dry chuckle. But the legal door remains technically open. That is the absolute best compromise I can offer my conscience. I absolutely did not argue the point with him. It was significantly more than fair. The catastrophic ripple effects slammed into their lives incredibly quickly. Without the massive, automated influx of my monthly transfers, my parents' lavish, artificial finances aggressively tightened almost immediately. The exorbitant, weekly spa trips completely stopped. The extravagant, high-stakes casino nights abruptly ended. My mother was humiliatingly forced to publicly sell the brand new, imported living room furniture set she had so arrogantly bragged about online. Megan's highly fabricated, lucrative influencer career completely, utterly collapsed without my stolen funds secretly propping it up. She desperately uploaded a tearful, highly edited video claiming she was the tragic victim of severe family betrayal. The video pathetically garnered exactly 47 total views. Exactly 1 week later, she was violently forced to secure a minimum wage job working the cash register at a local department store. It was her very first legitimate employment experience at 29 years of age. My father called my phone exactly once, entirely alone. I explicitly know I absolutely do not deserve an ounce of your forgiveness. You are entirely correct, Dad. You absolutely do not. A heavy, suffocating silence hung on the line. But I genuinely want to thank you, I continued softly, for finally possessing the courage to speak up at the hospital. It was entirely too late to fix the damage. But it absolutely wasn't. Nothing. He violently cried over the phone. I calmly allowed him to weep. The shocking, unvarnished truth aggressively spread through the entire extended family network like a virulent wildfire. Of course, scandalous news of that magnitude travels incredibly fast. Distant aunts and uncles who had foolishly believed my mother's toxic stories for decades frantically reached out to me with profound, desperate apologies. I graciously accepted some of them. I coldly rejected others. And my personal bank account, for the absolute first time in nearly a decade, I excitedly watched the numbers aggressively grow. $54,000 a year in surplus capital, flowing safely back into my own pocket, back exactly where it rightfully, legally belonged. My mother absolutely did not lose her massive inheritance because of a single word I spoke at the party. She permanently lost her inheritance entirely because of the horrific actions she chose to commit. There is a massive, fundamental difference between those two realities. 3 quiet months later, Emma is peacefully sleeping in her cozy crib. Grandpa is comfortably sitting in the wooden rocking chair directly beside her happily, reading a thick novel with his wire-rimmed glasses perched precariously on the edge of his nose. Daniel is safely in the kitchen brewing a fresh pot of premium coffee. This is exactly what my beautiful life looks like now. Grandpa eagerly comes over to our house every single Sunday without fail. He is actively, patiently teaching tiny Emma how to recognize the deep cadence of his voice, even though she is currently entirely too young to comprehend the words. He softly sings her beautiful, ancient folk songs from his own childhood. He tells her incredible, vibrant stories about her great-grandmother, the brilliant woman who had flawlessly seen straight through my mother's toxic manipulation 50 years ago. She would have absolutely adored your soul, he softly tells sleeping Emma. She would have aggressively spoiled you completely rotten. I silently watch them bonding together, and I physically feel a massive, jagged wound inside. My soul finally began to heal. The accumulated money from the permanently canceled transfers has already made a staggering, life-altering difference. We aggressively paid off our primary mortgage years early. We successfully seeded a massive, high-yield college fund for Emma. We finally took a genuine, relaxing vacation, our very first real vacation in over 5 years, traveling to a secluded, rustic cabin deep in the mountains where the absolute only sound was the wind howling through the pine trees. My father occasionally calls my phone. Now, we engage in highly careful, heavily guarded conversations. He is technically still residing with my mother, but something fundamental in their dynamic has permanently shifted. He has aggressively started setting firm, personal boundaries. They're incredibly small, tentative boundaries, but they are undeniably real. It honestly is not very much progress, he quietly confessed to me last week, but it is undeniably a solid start. That is significantly more progress than most broken people ever manage to achieve. He remained completely quiet for a long moment, then his voice cracked. I am so incredibly, profoundly proud of the woman you are, Paige. I absolutely should have said those exact words to you decades ago, but I am fiercely saying them to you right now. I honestly did not realize exactly how desperately my wounded inner child needed to hear that validation until he finally said the words out loud. Psychological healing is absolutely not a clean, linear process. Some exhausting days, I instinctively reach for my smartphone intending to call my mother. Pure, ingrained force of habit. 9 entire years of aggressive, toxic muscle memory. Then I violently remember that the loving, supportive mother I desperately wanted to call absolutely never, ever existed in reality. The real woman aggressively chose to play slot machines over rushing to her dying daughter's hospital bed. The real woman actively called me a selfish monster while aggressively spending my stolen money. That specific, toxic mother. I absolutely do not miss her existence at all. Exactly 6 months following the explosive party, my cell phone vibrated with an entirely unknown number. I almost aggressively ignored the call, but some strange, lingering instinct compelled me to pick up the device. Paige. Megan's voice sounded incredibly small, fragile, and utterly defeated. Absolutely nothing like her usual arrogant bravado. I said absolutely nothing in response. I simply waited in silence. I explicitly know I absolutely do not deserve the privilege of this phone call. I explicitly know you highly likely despise my existence. But I desperately needed to say something to you. I continued to maintain absolute silence. Let her aggressively work for the connection. I successfully secured a job. A real, actual job. I have been actively employed there for 3 entire months now. It is absolutely nothing glamorous or fancy, just basic, grueling retail work. But I diligently show up every day. I actually execute the hard work. She paused, taking a shaky breath. And I officially started attending intensive therapy. I was genuinely not expecting that specific revelation. Dr. Winters. She is aggressively helping me clearly see the reality of things. Things regarding Mom, regarding my own toxic behavior, regarding exactly how I was maliciously raised to falsely believe I was incredibly special and that the entire universe inherently owed me their resources. Her voice violently cracked with raw emotion. I am absolutely not calling to ask for financial help. I am absolutely not asking for your forgiveness. I just desperately wanted you to explicitly know that I am genuinely trying to change. For the absolute first time in my entire existence, I am actually genuinely trying to be a decent human being. Suffocating silence echoed over the line. Long, heavy seconds of it. Why exactly are you choosing to do this now? I finally asked softly. Because Dr. Winters aggressively asked me a terrifying question that I absolutely could not answer. She looked me dead in the eye and asked, when you are 90 years old and looking backward on the entirety of your life, exactly who do you desperately want to have been? And I possessed absolutely zero answer for her. Megan's breath violently hitched in her throat. I absolutely do not want to become Mom, Paige. I absolutely do not want to end up entirely alone in the world, pathetically wondering why absolutely no one loves my soul. I let her devastating words sit heavily in the air between us. This easily could be another elaborate manipulation, another highly calculated play, another toxic con. But something foundational in her vocal tone felt fundamentally different. It sounded genuinely broken in a highly specific way that absolutely cannot be artificially faked. I am absolutely not emotionally ready to allow you back into my life yet, I stated with finality. I explicitly know that. But I heard what you said, and I genuinely appreciate you possessing the courage to say it. Exactly a week later, I sent her a brief text message containing exactly 2 words, good luck. It was absolutely not instant forgiveness, but it was also absolutely not a permanently deadbolt door. Exactly 1 year later, my mother has absolutely never attempted to call my phone again. I heard through my father that she is currently residing in a cramped apartment with a bitter, old friend now. The massive family house was officially sold to strangers. As it brutally turns out, there were significantly more hidden, catastrophic debts than absolutely anyone in the family knew about. Absolutely no more lavish casino nights, zero luxurious spa days, absolutely no more elaborate, theatrical performances pretending to be the ultimate, perfect motherhood icon. I absolutely do not feel a sadistic sense of joy about her downfall, but I also do not feel an ounce of pity either. I simply feel incredibly, profoundly free. Megan and I are absolutely not close. We, realistically, may never, ever be close friends. But she is miraculously still attending therapy. She is miraculously still maintaining her retail employment. She actually mailed Emma a beautiful, handmade birthday card. Intentionally handmade, absolutely not store-bought. A seemingly microscopic detail, but an incredibly real, meaningful one. My father comes over to our house for dinner. Exactly once a month. He and Daniel happily drink beers and discuss professional football statistics. He gently holds Emma with a profound, quiet tenderness that I absolutely never, ever witnessed him display when I was a young child. Perhaps he is desperately attempting to make up for decades of lost time. Perhaps he is simply entirely exhausted from being the arrogant, cowardly man he used to be. Either way, I cautiously allow him to try. And Grandpa? Grandpa is a permanent fixture in our home every single Sunday. He is patiently attempting to teach tiny Emma exactly how to play competitive chess, even though she primarily still just aggressively tries to chew on the wooden pieces. He is currently writing a massive, detailed memoir recounting his fascinating 40 years serving on the federal bench, and he explicitly asked me to assist him with editing the manuscript. You are literally the absolute only person in this world I implicitly trust with the unvarnished truth, he stated proudly. I violently cried when he uttered those beautiful words. The incredibly good, healing kind of crying. Just last week, I was quietly putting Emma down to sleep in her crib. She fiercely grabbed my index finger with her tiny, warm hand and looked directly up at me with those massive, beautifully trusting eyes. And I made a silent, sacred promise to her soul. I will absolutely never, ever make you feel exactly like you have to aggressively earn my maternal love. You are inherently, unconditionally enough. You have absolutely always been more than enough. True. Family is absolutely not defined by shared blood. True family is exclusively defined by the specific people who aggressively show up for you, the people who fiercely stay in the dark with you, the people who actively choose your existence. Absolutely not because they feel socially obligated to, but entirely because they genuinely, passionately want to. I finally, victoriously found my true family, and acquiring them was absolutely worth every single agonizing thing I lost along the brutal journey. Before I officially log off, I desperately want to share a few profound life lessons I learned surviving this hellscape. Absolutely not presented as preachy advice, because I obviously do not know your highly specific, personal situation. Just brutal, unvarnished truths that helped save my life. First, suffocating guilt is absolutely not synonymous with genuine love. For decades, I tragically confused the two concepts. I falsely thought that feeling intense, paralyzing guilt about absolutely not helping them inherently meant I deeply loved my family. But weaponized guilt is simply a toxic tool that abusers aggressively utilize to control your actions. Authentic love absolutely does not function that way. Authentic love absolutely does not meticulously keep a scorecard. Authentic love absolutely does not purposefully make you feel microscopic. Second, you absolutely cannot set your own life violently on fire simply to keep toxic people warm. I explicitly know you have probably heard this cliché quote 1,000 times before, but superficially hearing the words and fundamentally believing the truth of them are two entirely different realities. It literally took me almost violently dying on an operating table to finally truly believe the concept. I desperately hope you absolutely do not wait that dangerously long to learn the lesson. Third, the specific individuals who truly, genuinely matter in your life will completely understand your established boundaries. When I finally drew a massive, unyielding line in the sand, I was utterly terrified. I genuinely thought absolutely everyone would instantly abandon my existence. But the exact opposite miraculously occurred. The specific people who truly, unconditionally loved my soul completely respected my definitive decision. The specific people who aggressively didn't, well, they simply, violently exposed exactly who they truly were to the world. And finally, aggressively choosing to protect yourself is absolutely not an act of selfishness. It is pure, unadulterated survival. It is profound self-respect. It is actively teaching your own innocent children that their mother explicitly knows her own inherent worth. Emma will grow up witnessing a strong mother who absolutely never apologizes simply for existing in the world. A mother who absolutely never pathetically begs for crumbs of toxic affection. A mother who inherently knows, truly knows deep in her bones that she absolutely deserves significantly better treatment. That is undeniably the absolute greatest, most profound gift I can ever possibly bestow upon her. Thank you so incredibly much for staying by my side through the entirety of this dark, explosive story. It was absolutely not an easy narrative to recount, and I am entirely sure it was absolutely not easy to listen to, especially if you have agonizingly survived something remarkably similar. If this story deeply resonated within your spirit, I would be absolutely honored to hear from you. Please drop a comment below and explicitly tell me exactly what you would have done differently in my shoes, or perhaps share exactly what details you painfully recognized from your own life. If you are entirely new to this channel, please strongly consider subscribing. I actively share powerful stories, exactly like this one, real, unvarnished stories about aggressively standing up for your soul, establishing terrifying boundaries, and finally finding your true, chosen people. There are significantly more explosive stories patiently waiting for you in the description box below. And please, always remember, you inherently deserve to be surrounded by people who actively, fiercely choose you back. Absolutely not because of what material things you can provide for them. Absolutely not because of what energy they can maliciously extract from your soul. But simply, beautifully, because of exactly who you inherently are. You are absolutely enough. You have inherently always been more than enough. Thank you so incredibly much for watching.